Hello, hello, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. The Pittsburgh Penguins are exactly 1 month away from the opening of the 2022-23 training camp, which means the beginning of the season is getting closer and closer. I believe 52 days, if I'm not mistaken, from the opening night matchup against the Arizona Coyotes. But we do have a couple things to talk about on this episode. News-wise, the Pittsburgh Penguins promoted assistant coach to now associate coach in Todd Reirden. We'll talk about that. The Penguins also signed college free agent Jack St. Ivany. We'll touch on that. And Jake Guentzel was named a top 20 winger in the National Hockey League, according to the NHL Network. So we'll talk about all of that stuff here in the next 30 to 45 minutes. But let's start with Todd Reirden, because in my opinion, that is the biggest news that we've seen since our last recording on Thursday. But with Reirden getting promoted to the associate coach instead of assistant coach and being signed to a 2-year extension, Horwat, what do you think about this promotion for Todd Reirden?
I mean, I feel like on the surface, not much will change other than a name tag, other than a little desk name tag. It's what really is an associate coach per se? Because he was just an assistant, I guess. It comes with a promotion. They're going to pay him a little more, apparently, to your contract extension. We don't usually know the numbers of a coach's contract, so maybe just there's a little bump there. And he's a guy that one day in the future might be able to be a head coach in the NHL again, and this kind of adds to the status of him across the league. I don't know how many other coaches across the league are considered an associate coach, because, again, that's just an interesting word to be placed on a coach behind the bench whenever the role is going to be enormously the same.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. So it was an interesting thing to look into whenever it first came across.
We talk about how the Penguins are always lucky to have really good star players in Crosby, in Malkin, and Letang. Same too goes for the coaches. And I know not a lot of people might agree with this take, but the Penguins have 3 extremely good coaches at the NHL level. I believe Mike Sullivan is one of the top 3 coaches in the National Hockey League. So to have him as the head coach is already a good thing. But Todd Reirden and Mike Vellucci, I mean, as exampled by the fact that they were both very far along in several head coaching vacancies this summer. They're both very good assistant coaches. So this is similar to the thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers when they signed Brian Flores. They didn't want to sign him and be like, hey, you are a head coach, legitimately a head coach, quality coach. We're going to bring you in, and we don't want to pay you like a normal defensive assistant. We're going to give you a higher title, which gives us an excuse to give you a higher paycheck. And Todd Reirden, we'll talk about it in a second, but Todd Reirden, according to the Pittsburgh Penguins, deserved a pay bump as well as a title increase from assistant coach to associate coach. So basically, they made it up to coincide with the fact that he's getting more money than Mike Vellucci at this point. But both Vellucci and Reirden are, in the NHL's eyes, starting to become on the radar as 2 of the better coaches in the league.
They really are. They truly are. And it sucks because Mike Reirden, I mean, had to come back and become an assistant coach again because he wasn't the greatest head coach in Washington, but so be it. He has that status under him already. And we, if anything, we know the way the NHL swaps head coaches around. It's the same group of 40 guys, and he's one of them. So one day he'll find another head coaching job. It's just a matter of time before, he does not leave here, but does find his new home as a head coach with, again, the more money, the bigger status symbol. But for now, this is a great little spot because he's done, the power play could always use help, but he's done wonders for this team's defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why he gets this. He doesn't get this because of the power play, because as we've all noted, the Pittsburgh Penguins power play, especially last season, was not good. And when you have players like Crosby, like Malkin, Letang, Guentzel, we've mentioned all their names already on this episode. When you have those guys, the power play needs to be better than, 19%, or I believe it was 20.2%, which was good for 19th in the league last season. That's just not good enough. It's not. And it was better the first year that Reirden came back. And last year, you can say what you will about Crosby was out for the first couple of weeks, 6 weeks of the season. Evgeny Malkin was out for the entire first half of the season. By the time they all got back on the ice together and got their groove going, the season was over. But I think when you look at it, he's going to need to do a lot better on that back end or on that power play. But what he's done on the back end has been phenomenal. I mean, we talk about a couple different ways. The reclamation projects that he's taken on into 2 years since coming back. You talk about Cody Ceci, what he was able to flip Cody Ceci into in just 1 year. Mike Matheson, what he was able to do with Mike Matheson in 2 seasons. And now you're looking at Jeff Petrie as his next plan. I mean, Petrie and Ty Smith are his next defenseman that he's going to have to mold into what he turned essentially Mike Matheson into. I think Jeff Petrie is probably the best starting point that he's been at with all these guys. But if you look at the reclamation projects, if you look at Chris Letang's performance in the past 2 seasons, it is no shock that it's because of Todd Reirden and the way that Todd Reirden coaches Chris Letang, and also the way that Todd Reirden's system just molds with Chris Letang's game. I think that's also a big thing. It lends to exciting hockey for the Pittsburgh Penguins, sometimes at the expense of the defensive side, but it's done so well for the Penguins in getting them more production from the back end than many other teams in the NHL.
Yeah, we've had a ton of production. You mentioned the reclamation projects, and I'm glad you mentioned Chris Letang because, yes, watching what Todd Reirden has done with Cody Ceci, yes, Mike Matheson and Jeff Petrie's the next project, if you will. He's had projects, yes, but what's even better is that he's been able to not rebuild, but keep steady careers like Chris Letang. Now we wonder if he can work that magic on Brian Dumoulin and maybe get Marcus Pettersson back on the right swing. But he's done so much for Chris Letang of all people. To have a career year at the age of 35 is astounding. And as a matter of fact, we didn't talk about Todd Reirden enough in these past few months whenever we've been discussing Chris Letang and his new contract and what kind of performance he had this year. We didn't bring up the fact that he was being coached by Todd Reirden for the last 2 seasons, and we kind of should have saw this coming. But now here we are. He's got they both have new deals, and they are both ready to have another great year together. I know Chris Letang going to be a year older, but that's fine. He might not have that same season, but if Todd Reirden is able to minimize the decline in play as much as possible, then it's a success and a well worth contract. So it absolutely came from the defense because, I mean, we're gonna hem and haw about the power play, I'm sure, a little more this season, just because anytime you list off those future Hall of Famers and they don't score, it's infuriating.
Yeah, and let's talk about that power play a little bit, because even in that first season back for Todd Reirden, the power play was pretty good. I mean, it ended up being, I believe, top 10 in the National Hockey League in that first season, which was the 2019-20? No, it was the 2020-21 season. And then last year, yeah, he did have some issues. But like I said, missing Crosby and Malkin for extended periods of time. You had a time where Brian Rust was having a little bit of a cold streak. There were times when Evan Rodriguez, even though he was doing a pretty good job on that unit, when you have a guy like Evan Rodriguez on that top unit and you're switching guys out, Rodriguez, I believe Heinen spent a couple of games there, it's going to be kind of tough to catch a groove. But the issue is, I believe, in the structure. I think that's the biggest thing that Todd Reirden needs to change heading into next season. Obviously, management has a lot of faith that he will, because there's no way they gave him a 2-year extension, was like, just keep doing what you're doing. That's what that's what we're needing. No, management sees the fact that the Pittsburgh Penguins power play was horrendous last year. I mean, top 20 is not a goal that the Penguins should be looking for the power play, but that's the best they could get last year. So I think the biggest thing is that they figure out how to finish. Now, Malkin being the heartbeat of that power play has always been a big thing for the past couple of seasons, especially since Phil Kessel has departed the organization. But I think they need to figure out a different way to operate, especially considering the fact that Evgeny Malkin, even though he was great last season, you don't know how long that's going to last, especially with that slap shot from the point. We have seen that less and less as Malkin's career has gone on. So maybe trying to change around what you're doing there. I think Jake Guentzel has done a really good job as the net front presence. He's kind of molded into that role there since Patrick Hornqvist left a couple years ago. But I think it needs to be run more through Crosby and more through Letang, because you see Crosby sit down at the goal line, and a lot of the times he barely touches the puck. It's between Malkin and Letang at top, and that's not necessarily an awful thing. But when it's not producing the way that it hasn't in the past couple of years, that's when you need to change some things. Maybe putting Crosby a little bit higher on that power
And enough with the drop pass thing. Enough with the
play.
getting it to the neutral zone and then sending it immediately backwards. I hate that because I get it's supposed to create a rush with whoever's catching that back pass, and it's usually Malkin or Letang, but still, it it's so overused, and we've been doing it for so many years now that it's just time to get a new system. It's every now and again, like a system needs to be changed, and the power play needs to change more often than just your regular offensive system
Mhm.
because the power play's been such an highly changed and evolutionized, really, uh, part of the game. It's no longer find the perfect shot. It really is run and gun as much as if you can, because you have that extra space, you have that extra man. I'm not saying it's turning into 3-on-3, but teams are becoming more forward heavy and more scoring first. That the Penguins need to stop passing it around as much as they do and just enter the zone and build up from there. You have the extra man, you have the extra space, utilize it. I don't know. I'm not a coach, so I don't know exactly how to design something like that. But I think we're all a little tired of seeing that back pass whenever we enter the zone.
Yeah, they need more zone entries with possession of the puck. A lot of the times they do like to dump it in, which, listen, I understand the thought process. You're up 5-on-4. You have more guys. You should be able to get down there, get in people's faces, forecheck hard, which is a pillar of the Pittsburgh Penguins game. And you should be able to get the puck back and get something set up. But I think when you look at what they do, that back pass, the big thing that bothers me about it is it gives the defense time to set up all four of their guys in a way that will disrupt your breakout. And a lot of teams have figured that out with the Pittsburgh Penguins on exactly how they need to line up to hinder that breakout and stop them and force the Penguins to dump it in when they don't have a lot of momentum going for Guentzel and Rust and Crosby, who've all been sitting at the blue line at that point
Yeah.
for 3 or 4 seconds. So I think that's the biggest thing. And for anybody that thinks that the Penguins power play isn't the biggest issue with the team, I think it is one of them, because if you look at the playoffs last year, obviously the Penguins outplayed the New York Rangers in multiple facets of the game, but it was all mostly at 5-on-5. The Penguins penalty kill did struggle a little bit down the stretch without Zach Aston-Reese after the trade deadline, but the power play was really the big reason. Multiple 5-on-3 opportunities in closeout games that they were not able to take advantage of. Meanwhile, the Rangers were able to, hence the game-winning goal was on a power play for the New York Rangers. If the shoe was on the other foot, I don't think the Pittsburgh Penguins would have scored in that instance, and that is a big issue heading into this next season.
That is a problem that needs to be solved, especially when you really consider the multiple 5-on-3s without a goal, because if you look at the way the Rangers were able to build momentum off of that as well, that's what sucked the life out of the Penguins in game, what was it, like 5 in New York? 4, it would have been 6 in New York.
That was 5.
Game 7 was in New York. Oh, yeah, 5. I got the games backwards. But yeah, in game 5 in New York, that's what sucked the momentum out of the team. We should have had them there. We were up 3-1. We should have had them at the series in 5 somehow. But we couldn't score on a 5-on-3. They built momentum off of it. Sure, we went up, but then I'm forgetting all about the game now. Did we go up first or did they? Because there was that time where I was driving home and I think we lost the lead there.
The Penguins were up in game 5.
Yeah.
Late in the second period, they were up 3-1, and Sidney Crosby went down due to some head contact with Jacob Trouba. They gave up the lead, ended up losing. I believe it was either 4-3 or 5-4 was the final score. But nonetheless, it was all predicated on the fact that they had an opportunity to get out to a really, really early lead in the opening minutes of the game with a 5-on-3. And not only did they not score, but it was so bad that they really didn't even get any opportunities against Igor Shesterkin. And that's the biggest issue, is because not only are they not scoring and it's bad luck, and sometimes that happens and whatever you need to say, they just aren't getting opportunities. And we've seen them excel at times. And I think that is the pure talent on that unit shining through. But you need a better strategy to help emphasize that talent and to help create more opportunities and better opportunities. That way, if they don't succeed, you can say, hey, the bounces just didn't go their way. Not they didn't spend any time in the offensive zone. They had 5 power plays and only 5 shots. That's not nearly enough. You need to have at least 3 to 4 shots on every power play opportunity when you have this type of talent.
With this type of talent, yes, that is the the big predecessor for this. It is we have this talent, we always have, and we've had this argument for years. We've been having this power play discussion for years,
Mhm.
even before we had a podcast or radio show. Before we met in college, we've been having issues with this power play that Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin are both on. Uh, every year it should be higher. Sure, we've had great years in the past, but um, this power play, you look at the names that are on it: Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang. You could throw Rust and Guentzel. You could filter in and out to other guys like Raquel if he needed to, or even Kapanen if you're really trying to revitalize his career somehow. We have names that can score goals. It's time for them to really start doing it, and a new system could help. Todd Reirden sticking around is perfectly fine. It
Mhm.
is now just the system that they are using and just not utilizing their skill set and losing momentum every time.
Yep. So, of course, congratulations to Todd Reirden. We do like seeing when people get paid. And honestly, I think overall, we'll grade his performance of the first 2 seasons since he returned from the Washington Capitals. We'll grade that at the end of the episode with our weekly Pens poll. But I think we're both trending in the direction that he deserves this promotion. He deserves this raise and extension. And I'm excited to see what he's able to do with this completely overhauled defense, because that has been the focus and the most change that the Penguins have seen this offseason is on that back end. So Todd Reirden, he's got a month until training camp, but he's got a lot of work to do this year.
And I think he can do it. I think everything can work out just fine. I'm excited for this season. I would like to see the fully fleshed out lineup.
Yeah.
Get us under the cap, find that last spot that needs to go and where. Just plug in the last couple of things, and I'd like to see what we can do. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of rerunning the same group, but I get you had to in certain cases.
Mm-hmm.
But our whole new defense, this should be exciting to watch.
Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about another defenseman that was added to the Pittsburgh Penguins organization over the weekend. We'll talk about Jack St. Ivany of Boston College right after the break. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. We're getting closer and closer to the start of the hockey season. Quick congratulations goes out to Team Canada, who won World Juniors over the weekend in a 3-on-3 overtime. Absolutely incredible save by Mason McTavish in overtime with a wide open net. Just sticks the puck out of there. And then on the other end, Kent Johnson, the Columbus Blue Jackets prospect, able to put it away and give Canada the 3-2 win over Team Finland, collecting the gold medal and becoming the reigning World Junior champions heading into, I believe there's another one that's going to happen in December. So they're going to have a quick turnaround to try to defend that championship. But let's continue to talk, as we've talked basically the last 3-4 episodes, about Penguins prospects. Well, they added another one over the weekend as they signed college free agent Jack St. Ivany from Boston College. The Eagle becomes the second Boston College alumnus to go into the Pittsburgh Penguins' current roster. Do you know the other player that played for the Boston College Eagles and the Pittsburgh Penguins?
I do, but I can't think of it.
That would be Brian Dumoulin.
Dumoulin. That's right. I always get. Yeah, that's it.
The Penguins have a lot of college hockey presence in their organization and have for some time now. I mean, you talk about Brian Rust for the University of Notre Dame. You also talk about Jake Guentzel, who played for the University of Nebraska Omaha as well. So a lot of Penguins that have ties to NCAA organizations.
I mean, Jack Johnson, when he was here, also Michigan. Yeah. There's a few more. I think I think Ruedel played in Michigan, actually. There's quite a few more that are just escaping me now. But that was one thing that was a standard that Jim Rutherford set here, was looking for college free agents, signing them. Drew O'Connor, a Dartmouth?
Yep.
Yeah, Dartmouth guy. Let's also not forget, speaking of the Ivy League, Jack St. Ivany did go to Yale at some point.
He did.
So
he did.
That's the other thing, too. We set the standard for not only their college kids, they are Ivy League college kids. We are not screwing around. We are signing smart boys.
Yeah, either smart boys or guys from Boston seems to be the main trend, to be completely honest. Because, I mean, you go back and Evan Rodriguez played for Boston University, not Boston College. And
Jack Eichel.
Yeah, and also John Marino played at Harvard. So obviously, when you don't draft in the first round very often, that's where the Pittsburgh Penguins have been trying to do a lot of their damage in the prospect system. So nice to see the Penguins reel in another one in Jack St. Ivany. He is a former fourth round pick of the Philadelphia Flyers in 2018, which ended up being the last draft for Ron Hextall as general manager of the Flyers. So there
Now it
is a
checks
little
out.
connection there. St. Ivany also fits the bill as all the other Penguins defensemen that have been brought in the past 2 years. 6'3", 205 pounds at 23 years old. He's a big boy, and he's going to be playing with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, joining Colin Sawyer as the other college signing this year that will both be starting out the season in the AHL level.
Chad Ruhwedel's days are numbered here, aren't they? He's not tall enough, man. He's just not tall enough. It doesn't matter how good he is, how much he actually brings to the table. He's just not tall enough. You put that tweet out about everyone's heights, and I sat there and had to really contemplate what this defense is doing. Don't get me wrong. As long as they're all skilled players, I don't care how tall or short they are. I'm not worried about height. I'm worried about your production on the ice. If these guys can produce, awesome. But we are seeing the trend here, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, it is a very defined trend. And if you didn't see the tweet, all the Pittsburgh Penguins defensemen basically that have been brought in, minus Colin Sawyer, over the past year and a half by Ron Hextall, are all either 6'2" or taller. And let's not forget, these are all players that are 23 years or younger. Most of them are in their teens still, like Owen Pickering, who's 6'4" and 18 years old. So there's a very defined characteristic for all the Pittsburgh Penguins' newest defense prospects. But I think you also mentioned the other part of it is they're not all just big lugheads. They're all puck-moving defensemen. They all have some very decent skating abilities, especially Owen Pickering. We can go on for days. But Jack St. Ivany also fits into that bill. He had 24 points, 4 goals, and 20 assists in 35 games last season with BC. And he fits that bill as not only a big kid, but also somebody who can move the puck and can contribute offensively. So there's a clear, I don't want to say, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a clear area in which the Pittsburgh Penguins are looking to add for the future of this position. Now, you're not going to see St. Ivany at all this year in the NHL level. At least I don't think so. But he's somebody that you could see is going to jump to the front of the line when it comes to younger call-ups, similar to what we saw for Cam Lee, similar to what we saw for Will Riley, guys that are going to be given the opportunity to be on that second tier and work their way into the call-up status.
Yeah, it's going to take a little time. It's going to take a little time for a lot of these guys just because they're young and still new to the system. You want to see them grow and mold the proper way. You just have to watch what they do in Wilkes-Barre this year. Especially with the logjam that we have. We've been discussing this defensive logjam from before we got this guy. We've been discussing the defensive logjam before we even made the re-signing of Chris Letang. There has been a logjam at the defensive position for the Penguins so long now that adding a new name, while he adds to a logjam, we at least know this one isn't going to be an immediate piece of it.
No.
He's going to have to grow into it and then really become a thorn in the side of everyone else in this defensive core, because eventually moves have to get made, adjustments have to be made, and contracts, I mean, let's just be real. Let's say we roll into the season with the same group we have right now. It just looks like maybe Dumoulin leaves for nothing. That's perfectly okay because we free up the cap space and free up the roster position. But that's a discussion for next summer. I'm just kind of saying.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go as far as to say get rid of Dumoulin, because I think there is a lack of top 4 quality defenseman on the left side for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Brian Dumoulin, while he is coming off of an MCL injury, he's on the wrong side of 30. You already saw him kind of start to decrease in his playing abilities last season. I do still think he's one of your best options on the left side. So even though it's $4.1 million, he is heading into his last year, I wouldn't get rid of him. That's my personal opinion. Until somebody like maybe Ty Smith shows that they can be that good, or Jan Ruda. I just don't see who else plays with Chris Letang. That's the biggest issue if you don't have Dumoulin.
It is, yeah. It's hard to find that other top defenseman whenever you're sticking around with a bunch of, not depth pieces, but middling guys.
Yeah, there's a bunch of top 4 guys, but a lot of them are still second pairing guys on the left side. Like a Pettersson, we don't expect him to be a top pairing guy. Ruda saw him play on the top pair with Hedman, but it is a little bit of a higher workload with Chris Letang because that defense down in Tampa is a little bit more evened out than the Penguins have been. So there's a lot of question marks surrounding the defense, and we'll go back to what we talked about in the first segment. That's Todd Reirden's job to figure out. But when we talk about Jack St. Ivany, he adds to this little picture that is being painted by Ron Hextall for the Penguins defense, joining guys like Owen Pickering, Isaac Beliveau, Nolan Collins, Ryan McCleary, Daniel Latch as giants on the back end, but still able to move the puck. So Horwat, before we move over and talk a little bit about Jake Guentzel, what do you think about this approach of bigger guys yet still able to move the puck, even though it might not be as good as a guy like P.O. Joseph is able to?
It's an interesting approach. I think it's new. It's the way Ron Hextall and Brent Burke want to build their team. There's not much you could do about that. Is the way they want to build their team. They went into the offseason kind of knowing they wanted to add size to their lineup. When you're when you're handcuffed by wanting to re-sign a guy like Evgeny Malkin and then keep Chris Letang around, you can only do so many size improvements. And then you also kept around Brian Rust, Rickard Rakell, brought back Danton Heinen, and Kasperi Kapanen. All of a sudden, your size is not deteriorated, but you don't have a lot of room to add your size. So you do it in forms of trades for defensemen, going from John Marino to Ty Smith is not what I meant. Going from John Marino on that second line there to Jeff Petrie, you add your size. You take away a little bit of speed, but you got your size that you've been looking for, and Ty Smith makes up for the speed if he is in the lineup.
Yeah, and I think at the prospect level, when you look at the future, something in Ron Hextall's nature has told him that you need to be bigger on the back end. Obviously, one of the biggest issues for the Penguins recent years has been the fact that they can't clear out the net front. Maybe that's the reason that he's bringing in bigger bodies. But I think Owen Pickering is the prototype for what the Penguins are looking for. They don't have anybody else really like that in that much talent with that much size. But you look at a guy like Isaac Beliveau, his rookie year in the QMJHL, he scored a lot of points. Now he has struggled in the years since, but he's still shown the ability to put up points in bunches, albeit at the QMJHL level, which is obviously leaning towards a lot more of a goal scoring of a league. But when I look at this approach, I think that there's something that these guys know that we don't, because these guys are projecting out a lot further. The scouts that are giving them reports are projecting out a lot further than we are. And something tells them that they need to be bigger on the back end. And that's exactly what they did. So I'm not going to necessarily go against it, but I'm interested to see if the rest of the NHL follows suit in that. And if that's a trend that we're going to see where a lot of these younger defensemen end up being bigger and a lot of these defensive cores end up being built up with bigger guys. Because if you look at the most recent trends, Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, Adam Fox, these are all smaller guys that can move the puck. They're not necessarily bigger guys. So I'm interested to see when that shift is supposedly going to happen, or if that happens on a league-wide basis, or if it's just the Pittsburgh Penguins.
I think it depends on the GM. You'd have to look around at what GMs want to do. We know Hextall and Burke would like their bigger guys. We know we can remember Jim Rutherford wanted bigger guys, but never really pulled the trigger on them. So it just depends on the GM. It's not really about the team and how they want to play their team. Trying to remember the GM of Colorado's name now, but
Joe Sakic Joe Sakic. He got promoted, but it was Joe Sakic last year.
That's right, it was. So he knows what it takes to. It just depends on the general manager and how the team wants to play. Head coaches might take into effect as well. Lou Lamoriello, I mean, he's sitting around doing nothing, but we know he likes some manly men, I guess.
Yeah, he has a lot of those contracts, but he doesn't have any contracts in the bottom of his drawer. At least that's for sure, for certain from what we've seen this summer. But let's talk really quickly. We mentioned last week that Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin were named to the top 20 list of NHL Network. Well, they released earlier today their top 20 wingers, not left wing, not right wing, but just wingers in general. And Jake Guentzel was named number 14. Let me pull up the list here from NHL Network, as he was ranked number 14, right above Jason Robertson, Chris Kreider, and Alex DeBrincat, but right below Kyle Connor, Matthew Tkachuk, and David Pastrnak. What do you think of the placement of Jake Guentzel on this year's Wingers top 20 list?
Kind of a little surprises ahead of DeBrincat and Kreider, actually. Big props to Jake Guentzel, then. I think it's a proper placement. We know he's not, tops, but I would have maybe looked around. I can't remember the top 10 right now, but I would have maybe looked around and wondered if he could have cracked the top 10. I feel like Kyle Connor is one of the most underrated goal scorers in this league as well. So it's hard to jump a guy like that. And then you do have Kachuk and all that. As for this top 10, I mean, they're going to keep giving Ovechkin his flowers. They're
Oh,
going to
yeah.
keep giving Kucherov his flowers. Kaprizov, yet same. Huberdeau finally getting some recognition, eh? I mean, Rantanen, when we discussed the big threes on teams, I had wondered where Mikko Rantanen has been. I haven't seen numbers really. We just hear about Landeskog and McKinnon all the time. So that's an interesting spot. I mean, I guess he's still pulling everything. Johnny Gaudreau, yeah, these are hard names to top.
Mm-hmm.
And Patrick Kane at 10, this has to be the lowest spot of his career, right?
Yeah, I would say so. But when I look at the top 10, as much as I like Jake Guentzel and we ranked him, or at least I ranked him at number 6 among the left wingers,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at total wingers, I wouldn't put him ahead of anybody that's in the top 10. I would still probably slot him above Kyle Connor, who's at number 13, but I'm not going to argue over one spot. I think
Right.
Jake Guentzel is properly placed at number 14 on this list.
It's about perfect. Yeah, it's Jason. I mean, also Jason Robinson being right behind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't really paid attention to the work he's done, but I didn't think it was all that much. But it must be quite a lot to be ahead of guys like Mark Stone, Philip Forsberg, and Alex DeBrincat.
Especially Chris Kreider, who just had a 50-goal season.
Yeah.
So I think you look at last year, and it was obviously a big year for a lot of these players, but I think that's also a reason you see a guy like Mark Stone sitting at the number 20 spot when usually he would be considered one of the top 10 wingers in the National Hockey League, the captain of the Vegas Golden Knights. But nonetheless, I like Guentzel's spot here. I think we also need to send out congratulations to the Guentzel family on the birth of their first son. I believe, what is his name? I can't remember it now. It starts with a C. I wrote it earlier today, but I can't remember it right now.
Way to go.
Yeah. But still, congratulations to Jake Guentzel. I completely forgot he was even married. So good on him. Good on him. Congratulations to that family. But let's finish off this episode with our weekly Pens poll. Finishing how we started, I should say, as my words get jumbled up here. How do you grade Todd Reirden's performance since returning to the Penguins in 2020? It was an A through F scale, Horwat. The results were rather positive for Todd Reirden. I mean, his success rate is pretty high up there. 43% gave him a B. That was the leading vote. 29% gave him a C. 24% gave him an A. And only 4% gave him a D through F. So rather positive results for Todd Reirden after year 2.
It's definitely not a failure. I also just don't think I can give it an A or a high B. I would go to a B minus to a C plus situation just because we had the discussion about the power play. Something needs to change on that power play. Some part of the system there needs to be adjusted to really get my opinion of him higher. I do love what Todd Reirden has done with the defense of this team. We talked about Mike Matheson turning a contract around. We talked about Cody Ceci having a phenomenal year. Talked about those two playing on the same line and being one of the better lines in our playoff drought a few years ago. We talk about how he's not turned a career around of Chris Letang, but has maintained a steady career for a 35-year-old Chris Letang. Mm-hmm. No matter what he does with the power play, it cannot be an abject failure of a coaching hire because he's done stuff like that with our defense. Now, I can't give him higher. Like I said, I can't give him higher than an A or a B just because of that power play, because of the names that are on it, and they need to score and be better than whatever percentage he says, like 22%. It needs to be higher than that. So I'm going to have to drop it to, just given the importance of a power play, a C plus to a B minus, edging towards C plus, just because for the love of God, score. Change the system. We've been watching the same drop back pass for years now. Before you got here, we were doing that.
Yeah. And honestly, I know that when he came back to the Pittsburgh Penguins, he was facing a lot of criticism from the Washington Capitals. He was not able to do anything in the playoffs. Well, I mean, the same has been true here.
Yeah.
But still, when you look at the way that he wasn't able to command that room with the Capitals, he might not be a head coach in that aspect, but he's a really good assistant coach. And I think he's one of the top assistant coaches in the league. Like I said earlier in the show, I give him a B plus for the job that he's done the first 2 years. I understand that, the power play has not been there, but to some extent that ends up being on the players too, because it's
Yeah.
not like you have a bunch of young guys that are coming out and trying to figure it out. You have guys that have done this for a very long time and that have been successful on the power play. So even if the system is not working, these guys like Crosby, these guys like Malkin, they should be able to either figure it out or go to the coach and say, hey, this isn't working. Let's fix it. Let's fix it. So I don't put all of the weight of the failed power play on his shoulders, although it is a part of importance. I think that is going to drop his score. I think as far as a defensive coach, he has not been given the greatest of assets. And guess what? All of these assets are expensive too. So you have to make them work, because if you don't make them work, it's not like you can send them down, not like you can easily trade them. So with John Marino and Marcus Pettersson and Mark Friedman, who was brought over, and you look at other guys like Ruedel and Matheson and Ceci, he hasn't been given the greatest pieces, but he's turned it into a really good result on the back end, especially we talk about those reclamation projects. I think that is his bread and butter, and we've seen him do that really well the first 2 years. So I would give him honestly an A, if not for how bad that power play was, and if not for the fact that the power play cost them a playoff series last year. Straight up. That is the reason why it goes down. But I also don't charge him with making that mistake fully, because the players on the ice are good enough that they should either be able to figure it out or they should be able to spearhead a change, and they just haven't.
Yeah, you're right there. But sometimes all things must go through a coach, and why not, hey, just guys, try this, please.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah,
also heard over the years that Crosby Malkin could be a little stubborn and headstrong with certain things, but you never know. We're not in that room yet.
Yeah, and if that drop back pass is still in the Penguins system this year and it's because of those guys, then you start to get on your stars a little bit. Hey, listen, Chris Letang's a great skater. Evgeny Malkin was a great skater in his day. It just isn't there anymore, and people are expecting it. Change it up a little bit, and hopefully the Penguins power play regains what it was back in the Phil Kessel days and gets up to the top 5, top 10 in the National Hockey League. They need it.
Yeah, it's something I've been saying about this team for a while now. We still play like a speed team when we don't have the speed. It's time to utilize some more skill.
Yeah. So unless you have anything else, Howard, I think that's going to be it for this one.
Nope, I got nothing else.
Alrighty. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. We will see you guys on Thursday. But if you want a little bit more Penguins talk before then, this week is Penguins lunch. Wednesday at 1 o'clock, I will be joined by Nick Hart, the play-by-play announcer for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, as we talk all about the Penguins prospects as August rolls on. But that's going to do it for this one. We'll see you guys on Thursday. Have a great week, Penguins fans.